those of you who haven't watched the call, highly recommend you watching. Luke dove deep into a lot of the topics that we'll kind of dig into again today and have a Q&A on. But we would really deep into, from fitness to what you eat and how you eat and traveling and, as we age and all of these different things and not boiling the ocean, right? And not trying to solve all the problems at once. And depending on where you are in your fitness journey and your health journey, et cetera, like, don't try to fix everything at once. Like, focus on something, attack that one thing. When you get that under control, then add something else. Like, make it a law of addition, not subtraction. For me, it was always, I added things to my routine, my diet, etc. Instead of saying, cookies are bad or any of that type of stuff, I would just add things to my diet where I was doing more good things, and they naturally started pushing out the other things instead of avoiding the things, because then it's this forbidden fruit that all you think about is the cookie or the soda or the beer or the whiskey or whatever the thing is for you. If it's the forbidden fruit, then it's all you fucking think about. So for me, it worked to just replace it with the good stuff. And then, I wake up, I ruck, I stand here, I've got a rucksack that I'll throw on in the middle of the day in a meeting and just kind of pace around in my office. Like, I started adding all these things in my life, and Neal and I talk about it all the time. There's like 100 things that we do on a daily basis that we've done for so long. They're just who we are. Like, I ruck, I took that bag to London, and I'm rucking around London, and that's just what I do. I ruck through the airport. I've always got that backpack on me, and it weighs 35, 40 pounds. So when I'm running through the airport, I'm kind of getting in a workout. Like, it's better than sitting on the the escalator thing. So anyways, all this to say, we're going to dive into it today. There's a great video up on YouTube with Luke and I. And for those who don't know, Luke, why don't you introduce yourself? For those, most of the guys that are on here probably met you at the 100 Man, but anybody that's going to watch this in the replay that maybe didn't, why don't you give them your background?
Sure. So my name is Luke DePron. I run a coaching program called the Fitman Project. Essentially, I help business owners, entrepreneurs improve their health, physiques, and energy, and really taking a kind of systems approach to improving their health and fitness, and really stepping into long-term sustainable fitness and lifestyle strategies. So as far as like background, I've done everything from, like thousands of hours of the personal training. I've done corrective exercise, working in rehab studios. I got to do some performance work, but really where my passion lies is really helping guys understand that exercise, nutrition, looking good, feeling good, they can all be supportive to your life rather than having to like consume your life. So if you're a guy who's listening to this and you're like, you're busy in your business, you got family, you got kids, and you're just wondering like, how can you do all of this? Like, you absolutely can. And when you understand, like, there's just some foundational things that if you bring into your life, all of those actual goals you care about, like, they're going to be better. A better version of you is going to be able to tackle all that other bullshit you're dealing with. So that's kind of the gist of it, if you will.
Yeah.
Neal, what about you, bud?
I love that, man. I watched the video, and apologies I couldn't make that one. But one of the things I think I've learned over the years, well, actually, I'll say it like this. I saw a really good post the other day that made me really think about this. And someone else had posted on their Instagram that after if you're a man and after you're 35 years old, your body is your life resume, like how it actually looks and feels. And I thought it was really interesting because I remember very clearly in my corporate days working for big Fortune 500 companies, and somebody walks in from compliance or human resources or your boss or your manager, and they're like overweight, they barely fit in their clothes, like whatever version of the obviously not in shape. Well, they're in a shape, it's just a different shape.
Sure.
Like they're just not in shape. And yet, they can speak to the construct that which they work within, which is the company you work in, right? And so like they're fitting into this mold, and yet, a compliance person will tell you the compliance rule of the company, or the HR person will tell you the HR rule of the company, or the manager will manage you according to the rule of the company. And you kind of like fall in line with all that stuff. But the reason why I'm sharing this is because if you run your own business, or you are an entrepreneur, or a solopreneur or anything where you don't have, 20,000 other employees doing the things that you do, like, and you can't like have your body show up for me. Like you cannot, like, I just actually had this happen to me about 12 days ago in Vegas. I was in Vegas for this conference, and I was getting introduced to a whole bunch of entrepreneurial people. And this guy proceeded to tell me about that he's a wealth builder. And he was talking to me all about this purpose and mindset and alignment and all these things. And the whole time, all I could think about was that this guy has got to be 3 inches shorter than me, and he's got to weigh 350 pounds. Like, like, how much wealth could you be building for others if you can't control yourself, like at the dinner table?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that's a big thing. And then the other thing I'll say to it, because I'd love to get your thoughts on this, Luke, is, there's a lot of people clearly talking about inflation and food and it being very expensive for people to eat healthy. And I'm constantly thinking about that. But then what I think is one of the biggest challenges for people in today's world is really portion control.
Yeah.
And I think about it constantly because I eat extremely healthy. I want to know where all my food comes from. I won't eat it if I don't know where it comes from. And even as recent as yesterday, I bought or had delivered, grass-fed, non-GMO, organic beef, all the things. But I made, out of one package of it, which it was $14, which, yeah, that sounds expensive. Um, but I made 4 burgers out of it and then fed my family, and everybody got 1 burger and a
Yeah.
salad and a thing. And so, like, it's really weird because I think this like eating healthy thing and not being able to afford it is completely blown out of proportion when you think about like people eating the right portions of food.
Yeah, I think, if you were to step like and look at this as like a nationwide situation, like food deserts are absolutely real, right? Like
Sure.
people in like really low economic situations are actually experiencing an environment where going to a grocery store within walking distance like isn't available, and they're shopping at quickie marts. Like that's a reality. My guess is guys who are on this training who are like opting into a growth minded group, they're probably not in that environment. So I don't want to pass over the fact that like, yes, there is that situation for, probably millions of people in the United States where access to quality food is much more difficult. That said, again, I think people who are listening to this, they probably don't fit into that camp necessarily. And to your point, from a portion control standpoint, like, yeah, I mean, the reality of hyper processed, highly palatable processed food that is so readily available to us, which myself included, like I want to eat all the cookies, right? Like it is absolutely in our face everywhere. And so like you are going to have to kind of maybe push it against the grain a little bit. And
Yeah.
depending on where you're at, I'm in San Diego, man, I could, blindfold myself, throw a ball and hit a healthy restaurant. But I grew up
Yeah.
in Rock Island, Illinois, and there are amazing. And so most restaurants feel like bar food, right? It's fried chicken tenders, fried wing. Like there are ways to make it work. And if you are in an environment like that, like, yeah, I would have been doing it a little differently there, right? I'm gonna have to be a little bit more picky and choosy when I go out to a restaurant. I'm gonna have to ask that extra question, to the to the waiter as far as like how we prepare this. And so if you do find yourself in one of those situations, like just understand, look around and be like, hey, if you want to be different than how everybody else is show up in an environment, like you are going to have to make some different choices. And if that means allocating obviously more of your financial resources towards your health, to me, that's the easiest thing to do because your health, like the whole without health, there is no wealth, like is the truest statement to me.
Yeah.
It's the lead domino for all of the other things that we're going to actualize in our lives. So that's an easy entry point for me, my thinking.
Yeah, I think that I mean, you could sit there and look at things like, you know, I see stuff on the internet, people talking about how much sugar is in ketchups or how much sugar is it, like I think a big thing of like you hit a nail on a head for me about like people need, I think, just need to do the ask that question of like, what's in this stuff? Like, especially if you're eating out,
Oh
because
yeah.
like you just don't realize. But there's some basics to get in check before like you actually need to care about how much sugar is in the ketchup. There's a lot of other
Yeah.
more
You're
important things to think about.
yeah. Before you go down like the biohacker route where you're sweating every little detail, like get the, get the low hanging fruit and, like things like eating out. Like eating out is tough. And like if somebody's in like a true, what I'm going to say, I'm going to use the word diet phase. And when I say diet phase, I specifically just mean we're in an environment where we're losing weight, a calorie deficit. You're going to have to be more restrictive, and eating out is just, particularly in the United States, it is going to be more difficult because what is the one tool that a restaurant has at their disposal? They need to make the food taste good. So that's
Sugar and
added,
fat.
that's added sugar. And then what's the other tool that they have to get you to come back? Size.
Yeah.
Right.
And so those are really like the levers that they're pulling, and you got to kind of be aware of that. So I always use like TGIF Fridays. I don't know if is that like I don't know if that's a nationwide thing.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
So that's always a good one in my book to kind of look at, because you can actually look at their menus online, and it's a pretty eye-opening experience for people, because you'll go in and um, you'll look at what you would think would be a fairly healthy choice, like a salad, and pull it up on their menu, and you're gonna be like, holy shit, this salad has like 1,350 calories.
Right.
And so even there, like when you're trying to like, hey, I'm getting a salad, and you have to start like looking at like, man, how do you even get all of these calories in this food? And
Yeah.
so that's where like even just doing a little bit of due diligence there, and that's hoping that there's only that in it, but remembering that the workers there, they don't necessarily, I mean, again,
They're not
if anything,
measuring.
the last thing they want is to not give you enough and have a complaint. So they might
Right.
even be giving you a little bit more. Um, so like, yeah, you got to kind of do a little bit of due diligence. And like, if there is an opportunity to like hop on a menu and like pull up some nutritional data when you're eating out, like take advantage of that. And you might be surprised that something that, you were going to make a quote healthier choice, and you actually might have been able to get something that you would have enjoyed a little bit more, that would have actually been more appropriate, because again, there's a lot of hidden calories coming in on some of those meals.
Yeah, I know for me, Luke, obviously we talked about this quite a bit, but I know for me, when I started out just doing Atkins. Like I was 350 plus pounds, and I just kind of cut the carbs and really focused on that stuff. But as I started getting closer to, where I was trying to get to, I really had to be more intentional, right? I started having to track my food. I got a kitchen scale, and I really avoided that for a long time. And I don't do that all the time. But it really helped me understand, you gave an example, the size of your palm and all those types of things. The serving sizes on things matter. Like, so when you look on the back of a nutrition on the label, it tells you, hey, this is only 100 calories. But you have to pay attention to that serving size, because sometimes those serving sizes are really freaking small. And you
Yeah.
don't realize how much a tablespoon is. And like
Yeah.
peanut butter, I love peanut butter. That's one of the things that I would go to. And I would just grab one
Classic
of
mess
my
up.
tablespoons and
Yeah.
grab a fucking tablespoon,
Yeah.
which is really probably like 4 tablespoons, right? So when I actually measured it out, I was like, holy shit, I'm eating a lot of damn peanut butter.
Yeah, this is
Everything's bigger in Texas, right?
Well, that's true.
This is one that like parents and dads will kind of like have to catch themselves on, because when you have kids, I'll hear this a lot. It's like, hey, you don't want to like waste the food, right? And you make something for your
Right.
kid, like they barely touch their plate, and you're like, oh, I'll just finish that real quick.
Right.
And that mentality, like again, I get it. We don't want to waste food, but all of a sudden, like you said, like, man, 2 extra tablespoons of peanut butter, and it's like right there's like another 250 calories, and like
Yep.
it will start to stack pretty quick. And obviously, guys, listen to this. Like, not everything's about calories, but at the end of the day, if we are going to talk weight management, like that is going to be the most foundational piece. And so yeah, little things like peanut butter is a classic one where people always say like, oh, what do you think about peanut butter? Or what do you think about X? And it's like everything has a place and it has a context.
Sure.
So peanut butter for a lot of people, it's like maybe not a really great diet tool, because like you said, for the little bit of amount, like it's actually a pretty heavy hit calorie dose where you can
Yeah.
probably get something more volumizing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I think
go ahead, Tim.
I think it's like one of the things for me, like last year with running Ironman and training for endurance, right? So it's a whole different diet plan,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it was a really fascinating experience, because I got to understand how my body works. Like, I think a big piece of what guys just don't like, because we go to school, if you don't explore this stuff enough, you played volleyball in gym, right? Maybe you did the peg thing and you climbed up the thing. Maybe you had to do a bunch of push-ups one day in gym, and in your health class you learn the pyramid, and then sooner or later you get introduced to protein, and then someone tells you this is good and this is bad, and then like you almost like feel like you're eating healthy lots of times because you didn't eat fast food. And it's just like there's an evolution, I think, for guys to like really not only understand what healthy is, but also like what's healthy for me. And then you
Right.
get people's like sensitivities and I was just explaining this to a guy yesterday, that I used to always think that the gluten sensitivity thing, like when you hear people, you go to a restaurant and people be like, I have a gluten sensitivity. And then last year, I gave up a lot of uh, heavy breads and stuck with the simple carbs because of the endurance training was so much better. And it actually is pretty crazy. I'd go a month with hardly any bread or anything with gluten in it, which is hard to do because like gluten's in ice cream, gluten's in basically everything as a binder, and you don't realize until you actually give it up that it's everywhere.
And you know, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, and just to say, like, I think it's important for guys, because I am now that biohacker doing all the things, you know, but I think something that guys really struggle with is like really getting to know what works for their bodies versus what doesn't, because it's not the same for everybody.
Yeah, and this is where I was going to say, like, you can just simply run test retests, and this can be something that's a little bit more fun in your mind, like you can think of this way, but it's like if you have a suspicion that something's bothering you, it's like pull it out for 2-3 weeks, and then like bomb yourself with it, and see how you respond, and you might actually uncover, wow, like I don't feel as good doing this. Like here's a really good example of this in a more simple sense that I'll have guys run is we'll do a breakfast test, and it's like, hey, let's just eat more, like let's do a high protein, higher fat morning, and let's like see how you respond. And then do that for like 3 or 4 days. And that's like, cool, go hit a high carb breakfast, see how you respond. And just getting like that little bit of feedback of like, wow, when I start off my morning with like a big bowl of cereal, like my energy did crash. I wasn't focused as well. And like, you can start to steer this and kind of dial in like what we talked about, your personal EOS, like your eating operating system, where like you feel the best. You know, maybe, like there's fruits and vegetables that are FODMAPs that are like going to be disruptive to other people's stomachs, and it's like if you can identify what that is and start to personalize what you feel best on, it starts to get a lot easier to be compliant, because now you have like a performance outcome as far as like, man, I feel good eating this way. Now you'll probably still like fall back into like, I smashed all the cookies one day and felt like shit, or I drank too many beers, right? Like that might still happen, but most people have such variety and novelty, like we spoke about on that last time, that they don't really have a good idea of how most foods are affecting them. And you don't have to go full Jordan Peterson and go full carnivore to do this. But like you can simply pull something out, reintroduce it, and see how you do.
Yeah. I mean, I was just gonna say, so I think another piece to this that I started with, and it really talks to that, is you have to really pay attention to what you're eating. And for me, that started out with tracking all the food I was eating, portion sizes, what I'm eating, etc. And it wasn't as much to necessarily track macros, which it was, but it wasn't. But it was also more on the how do I feel on this food? Like when I eat legumes, or when I eat onions, or when I eat, nightshades and all that type of stuff. How do they make me feel? And it really started because my wife, she has gluten intolerance and she's got thyroid problems and all this type of stuff. But what we started realizing is she has a lot of food that she eats and they don't do well. Like I mentioned I did a Loom today with protein. So I use a company called True Nutrition. And the reason I like them is because you can actually customize your protein, and they have whey protein and soy protein and rice protein and all these different options. So you can build whichever one works for you, and you can build all of those. And then you put in the flavor that you want, and you can go light or heavy on the flavor. And then you can put in other adders like multivitamins and mushrooms and other stuff. but all of that, and it's cheaper than what you probably get at GNC. It's higher quality, all that kind of stuff. But the point is that I know what works well with me. My wife can't use the protein that I get because I do the whey protein and beef collagen, and that drives her nuts. She can't have that much beef. It just, her stomach doesn't digest it well, and she doesn't feel well. But the only way she knew that is because she started doing that. She started doing an elimination diet. She started tracking her food. I started tracking it, and now I understand how my body reacts to certain foods and how I eat. To your point, that doesn't mean I won't go crush some cookies or drink too much bourbon, but I know that in advance, I know I'm going into this, I'm going to feel like shit tomorrow, but it's worth it. Like I'm going into it eyes wide open instead of, why do I feel like shit today?
Yeah. You know, it's funny. So I'm not a big advocate of like, to like name the diet and like somebody I'll talk to like, oh, I'm going to do this. And it's like, all right. And it's like, let's get this more at like a foundational level. But the one that is a fairly good, like, so like Whole30, the idea of basically like getting rid of processed foods for like a chunk
Right.
of time will really eliminate like the vast majority of problematic things for people and give you a pretty good clean slate to start that process with. Whereas most people, like, man, if you just have a lot of chaos in your nutritional philosophy, again, that high novelty side that we talked about the other day, you're going to have a pretty hard time trying to like identify anything. So really, like, to me, step one, it's like reducing processed foods, right? Like that's going to take you like 90% of the way there.
Right.
And then you can start to like fine tune things. And that sounds so simple. But like, that's not that easy because, you know, if you have work events, if you're going out to eat, like there is just an overabundance of highly processed, highly palatable, processed food in our food environment. You're going to run into it at some point. So.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, and I think it's like you said, Luke, it's like that removal of that piece is not as easy as it sounds, but also will take you like 90% of the way there, right? Like, I think it's funny, you know, the classic like sitcom episode where like you know, the 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 couple goes on diets and all the guys got to do is like give up on Pepsi and like not eat as much pizza, and he loses 5 pounds, and yet like the woman is doing all the things, and like she's sitting there like losing a pound like a month, you know, because I think our bodies are different. But that removal of the processed foods, I think is like so compelling, because that's what I did end up doing last year. And you know, occasionally I'll dip into something with my kid or something like, you know, and I'll be like, wow, this mac and cheese is fantastic, I'll take a spoonful of it, but like that's about all I'm going to do. And I also think like I'm very interested in how metabolisms change and how like our relationship with foods don't. So like I love watching. I think you and I talked about this when we did our podcast a couple of months ago. I love watching these like Instagram trainers like tell these stories about like all you got to do is be in a caloric deficit, right? And it's like it's simple. This plus this equals this, and you'll lose weight. And like there's always this variable in there to be like, yeah, but I'm going to be 46 years old next week. I do not have the metabolism of a 25-year-old anymore, you know, like, and now I may have to, you know, work a little bit harder, unless even if I'm eating in a calorie deficit, because my body just doesn't work the same way.
Yeah, the metabolism thing, I think people get really confused on, as far as like there is metabolic adaptation when you go through diet periods to where things are going to downregulate. When you have, say, like a 22-year-old, a big difference with them is actually going to be the lifestyle side. Like, and it just think back when you were 22, like compared to where you're at right now, and as far as the obligations that you actually have in your life, in your business, significantly different. And so there, the output is definitely going to be higher. Whereas as you age, like you're going to just through, I think, life responsibilities, we're going to see a downregulation of NEAT, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So like this, like what we're all doing right now, sitting here having this conversation, like, yeah, I'm at a standing desk kind of moving, but like how many 22-year-olds at 5 o'clock on a Tuesday are joining a mastermind having a conversation, right? They're not. They're all fucking around and moving.
Yeah.
Or the ones that aren't, that are sitting there playing video games, we know what they look and feel like. So
Right.
so there is and this is where I think getting strategic and doing some phasic work within that to offset some of that metabolic adaptation. And again, we can dive into the details if we want on this. You do have to just get more tactical. And this is where, as the further you get towards those goals, like the more that you're going to have to deal with this. So like you can't be in a calorie deficit forever. And while yes, fundamentally, like that's what has to take place for a fat loss experience to happen. Just like if you want to gain weight, like you have to be, like, carbons don't get made from nothing.
Right.
You have to be in that surplus. There's still a lot of other factors that are at play. I mean, there's your stress, your sleep, again, your job, like so many things that are your hormones, right? Like you're like, try telling somebody to like, oh, you just need to pull some more calories out. And they're like, yeah, but I'm starving all the time. And it's
Right.
like, well, good luck. Like, so once you've kind of run into that adaptation, like, man, you're gonna have to exit that diet phase. You're gonna have to rebuild the metabolism. Like, you're gonna have to start that process over again. And this is where like taking that phasic approach. So like, Aaron, I know we talked about like when you're 350, man, from 350 down to probably 300, it's like moving basic things. Maybe even all the way down to, what do you weigh right now?
About 230.
Okay, so maybe down to even like maybe 250 even.
Yeah.
Maybe it was like almost smooth sailing, but then 250 to 230 was a whole probably different ball game.
Yep. 100%. That's when I had to start really dialing in macros and really paying attention to what I'm eating.
Yeah. And this is where, understand, like, you probably won't straight shot your goal if you have a significant amount of weight to lose. And this actually, when you take a step back, doesn't sound so crazy, because you at 350 to 230 are a completely different dude.
Yeah.
Like, no one's confusing you at 230 and being like, Aaron, what are you weighing these days? 350? Like,
Right.
no. Right. And so to like make that level of leap, man, there's going to need to be some maintenance phases there where your metabolism has an opportunity to restore. And,
Yeah.
you know, you're going to have to like bring that NEAT back up and exit that phase, get at some maintenance level, and then do the next level of work. And that's where I think people run into trouble. And it's like, man, my metabolism, I'm getting older. And it's like, well, you've done a lot of the hard work, and now you're just butting up against your physiology, and we got to put the brakes on this for a bit.
Yeah. Tito, you got a question?
Well, it's more like not a question. Anyways, hi, I'm Tito. Luke, how you doing? Aaron, good to see you guys. Neal, what's going on, brother? So like, well, we were talking about, like, you know, the diet and all that, and the thing that I remember starting, because I've done paleo numerous times, is cutting out like, you know, no sugar, no carbs, no flour, none of that shit, cutting all that shit out, and then your body going through that withdrawal of like of you know, you're detoxing from everything. And I just felt like shit, and my body was dragging. I was in the gym, like I couldn't push as much as I wanted to. I couldn't lift as I just felt it. My body was going through that withdrawal. So I definitely know the process of starting these diets and cutting, you know, all the good things that, like, you know, your morning coffee, or maybe drink coffee but with with some whipping cream, and cut out that creamer. No carbs, looking for alternate. And man, does it your body goes through like a toll. Like, you see how much of all this stuff that you put in your body, how much your body depends on it. Then when you take it away, your body's like, whoa, like, what's going on? And then I was just an ornery fuck, man. I was just irritated. I was pissed off. I couldn't, my coffee with no creamer. I was just like pissed because, it wasn't sweet enough.
Yeah. I'm with you, man.
So yeah, I definitely know the pain and suffering, but towards the end, because we did it for it was a 30-day challenge, but towards the last 2 weeks of it, man, then my body just rejuvenated, and I felt like my energy come back, and it just felt good, and you almost don't want to put that stuff back in your body again, we've even done dry Januaries where we stopped drinking for the whole month, and you can even see it. I mean, people, women, guys, man, I'm missing a beer, missing a glass of wine at night, a nice little whiskey at night just to, calm me down, and so I can go to bed. So yeah, it's crazy how much I guess you could say, pollute our body with all these things, and then when we minus them out and take them away, you see the effects that all of this stuff has on you.
Yeah, man. And it's, what's crazy on that too is to think about on the flip side of that, how many people are pushing in really poor quality. And if we're going to talk about toxic, like energy toxicity, right? Like too much. And like, man, you can beat the shit out of your body and it keeps going for the most part pretty well, like until that breaking point comes. And yeah, it really does take like getting to the other side. You did mention like the low carbs and the fact that like you're in the gym, like that I will say is one of the huge mistakes I see where guys pull carbs and they just do not have the level of like carbohydrate for their level of performance and activity. So like this is again like that personalized side of things. So like for myself, like doing jujitsu is quite demanding. And like, so tonight, if I'm going to make it, Tuesday nights are just, they're tough. We do live wrestling, we do positional sparring for like an hour, and then we do live rolls. Like, man, it's rough. It's like, sweet. I get to come back and I'm like, I smash bread. I've had pancakes on certain days. Like I'm being strategic and intentional in having that because I actually need to acquire more carbohydrate and more to replenish glycogen at that point. And so I think understanding even like how you can then implement some of those tools, like could I have had another sweet potato? Maybe, but like as long as my micronutrients are covered, like, hey, there's an opportunity to like almost strategically treat, but it's really in a way that like I need to get these glycogen stores replenished. And so I will say like the low carb, if you're doing intense exercise, always ends up being a disaster for everybody. And no question, when you like first pull out processed foods, you're like, and particularly if you're pulling potatoes and you're pulling grains. So like if you're not doing rice, you're like, what am I like, where are my carbs? Because most people won't pull in that much through just fruit and legumes. So like when you go on that whole 30 paleo, you're like, where is it coming from if you're exercising that hard?
Yeah.
I think you're spot on with the point about how'd you say it? Like eating strategically. I think that's like a very important piece of like what people, because you'd like to think that you could slap on the hello, my name is paleo, the hello, my name is keto, hello, my name is whatever diet.
Yeah.
And it's going to fit within the confines of your needs. But again, like I just have developed a very different relationship with my body with the endurance training last year, because you'd have, just to give context to everybody, you'd have 2 days a week where you wouldn't be doing a lot of exercise at all. Those are your recovery days. Then you'd have 3 days or 2 days of, let's call it maintenance. So I'd be running 5 to 7 miles and biking 20 or 30 miles. That was just maintenance. And then, Saturdays I would bike from my house to New York City, which is 109 miles, and blow through 8,000 calories in a day. Like, and you start to really see how your metabolism works when you have those type of days, because on the days that I was off, I'd be starving because my metabolism would just be so used to it. But I'd have to like really be like, no, today we're eating like a human.
Yeah.
On Saturday, after I got done with my bike ride, I was eating a whole pizza, like flat out, like just smashing a pizza, because even if I ate the whole pizza, I was still going to be in a calorie deficit at the end of the day.
Yeah. And like having that cyclical approach, like around activity levels, obviously, if you're just starting out, focus on stability at first. Where guys get in trouble with that is, so constrained energy theory, there's basically, so like take that jujitsu class for me. If I go tonight, I can't tell you how many days I'll come home and I'm like, I have some things that I need to get done. And then I'm like, let me just take a quick seat on the couch for a second after I get out of the shower, and I'm stuck because it's an intense hour and a half. And what's really happening is my body is just trying to constrain the fact that I did just blow out a bunch of calories and constrain my movement there. And so, you're going to see that adaptation happening. And this is the whole, like, you can't out train a bad diet. And it's like, well, yeah, you can't, because even when you have those like really high peak outputs, man, your body's just going to down regulate somewhere else. And you're going to literally, it's kind of like you could go look up like how many calories does a chimpanzee burn, or how many calories does a blue whale burn, right? And it's going to be like 30,000 or something crazy. Well, you could say the same thing for a human, and like for the most part, it's going to be constrained in this. There's not this infinite burn that we get because again, it's
Yeah.
going to downregulate elsewhere. And so this is the whole like can't out train your diet mantra, but really understanding that you can't. So the output side, out unless we're getting into like the extreme side of endurance, it's like you almost don't have to concern yourself with it outside of again those higher level of intensities. So like on a day that I didn't do jujitsu, it's like, do I need to really think about like slamming in a shitload of carbohydrate on the back end? Probably not, right? I can probably just eat like a normal person, right? But that's understanding like you will have that adjustment will also save people. I think the mistake of I'm just going to go harder in the gym. I'm going to go do another hour of cardio. And it's like, well, okay, but are you going to offset that later by being exhausted? And if that's the case, maybe there's a smarter way for us to get on whatever side of that deficit, whether we want to be high, low, or maintenance.
Yeah. I think the other piece to this, because, you know, a lot of guys, obviously, as they get in their age, older or whatever, like many of the guys we're going to be talking to it with are either trying to add muscle or they're trying to lose weight or maybe they're trying to maintain, right? But there is that other flip side, obviously, for some folks. Like I'm looking at you, Justin. Like Justin is, you know, what did you call yourself? You had a term. I don't remember what it was.
Skinny fat.
There we go. That was the term.
Yeah.
So not everybody's trying to lose pounds, right? They're not trying to be in calorie deficit. Justin, I know you talked about like, obviously that's not your problem. Like your problem is not having to take off fat, but you feel skinny fat, right? So there's a whole nother thing because again, it's food is fuel, right? Food is the fuel that we put in our bodies to what he was just talking about. It's where as we spend energy, you know, Justin and I are playing on an adult softball league, right? So there's a whole bunch of, you know, 40-plus-year-old people that I haven't played softball in 15 years. You know, I slid into second base the other day and pulled a hamstring. My back of my hamstring is all black and blue. But it's just, you know, I could roll jujitsu, I could do all these things. I rock 3 miles a day, but that's just something I haven't used those muscles in that way in a long time. So, you know, some of this is recovery. Some of this is everybody is different. So Justin, for you, it's going to be different than for Tito and for Neal and for me and even for Luke. You know, it's about what goals do you have. At the end of the day, though, I think we all on here have a goal of sustaining longevity and having a healthy, able body, right? So that we can play softball and we can do jujitsu and we can play basketball or do all those things. The funny thing is Carrie and my wife and I were talking about it today. When we were teenagers, we could all go out and play softball or play football or basketball or any number of things. Nobody was ever worried about getting hurt. Like you weren't worried about pulling your hamstring. You weren't stretching beforehand. You just fucking went out. You fell out of a tree from 10 foot, you know, you scuff yourself off and you get up and run. Our bodies are not like that anymore because we don't use them and it starts shutting down and we don't use those muscles in the same way. I remember the first time I went to jujitsu probably 3 years ago. And I was probably in the best shape. I could run a mile in under, you know, 7 minutes. And, you know, I was at my lowest weight and, you know, body fat percentage and all that kind of stuff. I was working out 2 times a day and all this kind of stuff. And I went to jujitsu and the first session I rolled, I was wrecked. Like I'm like, what the hell is going on here? Like this was 5-minute rounds. I think I only did 2 of them and I couldn't breathe. I was sitting on the sidelines. Like it was just using my body differently than I had in ever. And it was insane and awesome. And I kept going back but it's one of those things that we've just got to be able to understand where we are, what our goals are and how we can get there based on who we are in our body types.
Yeah. And dude, it's funny, the novelty, I had a similar experience recently. I was back in the Midwest for my grandmother's funeral and a cousin, and we went to the gym and played some basketball. And I haven't played basketball in forever. And we got roped in. So we're doing 2-on-2. Then there's another group. We get roped into 4-on-4. We do multiple games. Then I'm like, dude, I am done. And I'm like, they're like, no, one more. I end up staying in. I mean, I was wrecked. And again, I would put myself I'm a fairly fit individual. I was wrecked.
Yeah.
Because there's a level of novelty. So I haven't been doing much plyometrics and I have no ability to shoot a basketball. it's insane how bad I am at shooting a basketball. But what I'm useful at is playing defense and grabbing boards. So I can jump up and grab the rim still. So I'm just trying to be Dennis Rodman down there to make myself useful. And so I probably jumped, I don't know, 150 to 200 max out effort jumps.
Right.
And I hadn't done that in probably, I haven't done any plyos in like a year. So for me, I was wrecked, but I'm wrecked because of the novelty. And that's an eye opener. It was actually an eye opener for me to step back and say, like, okay, so what are like those fitness tangibles that I do want to have? Right now, jujitsu is probably the thing I enjoy the most. I still like lifting because I still want to be strong. I still want to be healthy joint wise. But there was a little bit of a hole where I need to bring more bounce back into my life. For me, my big longevity goal is to hike. And obviously, like, Aaron, you like rucking. So you can kind of look around in like your own world and say, like, well, like, what's actually important to me? It's like, man, if you got kids and like they're obsessed about baseball, well, I'd be all about having healthy shoulders and the ability to be able to go out and play catch.
Right.
Right. And like really figuring out like what are the areas of, I think, fitness that you need to have the capacity to interact with. I had another mentor at one time who was he just missed the Olympics, ran like a 4:03 mile. So like,
Oh, wow.
Like he's doing 100 meters, what I would do slower as my full sprint. He does that 16 times.
Right.
And he had something good. He's like, man, I just want to keep my body to where if some lady's purse gets stole, I could just run after the person. And I'm like,
right.
Yeah. Versus like, no, I got to stretch before I try to go, so you can start to think like, what's the physical capacity that you feel that you need to maintenance for yourself, right? And like, what are the prerequisites to do that? Like, is it strength? Is it mobility? Is it endurance? Is it jumping, right? And you can start to kind of piece together some things that way too.
I think that's a big critical piece that I think, again, I laugh at our kind of like physical fitness system, right, in schools, because it's built to, I guess, kind of get you to explore athletic sports. And then they're kind of like, I went through this phase, probably right at 38 through like 43, where like my metabolism slowed down a lot and life just happens. You have kids, you get used to having bourbon and steak at the same time, and it really wasn't until I took a conscious approach to be back in the shape that I'm in now, to where, even I'm 230 pounds and I run a solid 8-minute mile, can run a half marathon, can bench 3.25, and really and focus on my own mobility as a thing. And I think there's a big interesting thing that a lot of guys don't think about also, is like this brain that we got isn't even able to process the fact that because of medical advances and health and all that stuff, as long as you take care of yourself, you're going to live until you're 85 years old. And there's mobility things to think about where like that piece I think is so critical, because with my grandfather, both my grandfathers just passing away in the last 8 months, it's like I've seen many, and you guys have all seen this. There's like a 72-year-old version of a guy who like needs a walker and needs help to get out of the couch.
Yeah.
And there's like a 72-year-old version
my father
doing pull-ups, like, and the only difference between both of those people is really going to be that they consciously focused on mobility and took an effort to it, instead of just like shotgunning burgers to the back of your throat, like way too often.
Yeah, man. I mean, so I'll be turning 40 this year. And again, I think this is where, like forward thinking of like, what do you want to experience out of life? Like I've always kind of said, I'm like, I feel like the anti-trainer, or the anti-fitness coach. Like for me personally, and this is no judgment to anybody's in this, but like the idea of getting up on like a bodybuilder stage, like painting myself orange and flexing, like that just seems so strange. I don't have that relationship to fitness.
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of folks, like for a lot of guys, you look at the fitness community and like that's what you see, and you think like, so this is what I got to do, and like you don't. Like personally, me, like I don't go to a gym to work out. I have a home gym on my deck. All right. Like again, for me, jujitsu is probably one of the top priorities, but for somebody else, it might be something else. But like when you look into the fitness space and you just think, that's not me, like I totally get it. You don't have to interact in that way to be extremely fit, extremely healthy. Again, no judgment if you want to go to a bodybuilder show. That's awesome, man. But for I think most people, they look at that world and they're like, where the fuck do I fit in this? And it's like, you want to be a fit dad, like you want to be a fit business owner, like you want to have energy to actually go execute on the things that you actually care about. Like then you can get a foundational of health and fitness in line, and it doesn't have to come through the lens of that, I'm gonna say it, like douchebag fitness culture that maybe you don't really like relate with.
Right. Right.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Neal, you described my father, and that's one of the things I have, on my wall. And I'm not kidding. He's 75 and he can't walk 10 feet without being out of breath. He can't get up out of the chair. When he comes over to my house, they live in Dallas and we live in Austin, so it's 2.5 hours away. When they come visit, I have to bring my my office chair into the living room so that he can sit in the office chair, because it's the only thing that he's comfortable in, because he can't get in my couch, because he can't get out of my couch, and he struggles to get upstairs to the bedroom. So they just don't come visit because we don't have a bedroom downstairs. So I don't want to be that. And he's only 75. I don't even see that as that old, but he's 75 years old and he has a horrible quality of life. And you know what he says? I'm just old. That's the way it is.
Yeah, man, that sucks. And I'm sorry to hear that for your dad, but like that story is so common, man. Like how many people are 40 going on 60? I mean, here's the crazy thing to me is how many people look back, how many guys will look back and be like the most in shape and physically, like their physical prime was high school sports.
Yep.
So if you're past 36, that's over half your life ago. You exited your physical prime playing high school baseball. Like that's wild, man. That's like a long life to have to just be degrading physically. When man, you can I know I shared this last time we chatted, but like, dude, I just remember I'm literally hiking that hike to see Delicate Arch, and it's like, dude, there was a couple that was like 90 years old. Like there's so much cool shit to go do and see in life, and like to not have the vehicle to be able to go interact with that is insane to me, when the maintenance cost of it, it's not that crazy.
Sure.
Not that crazy as far as what you actually have to do. And yeah, man, there's such a it's like, 72, it's not old, man. Shit, actually the basketball game that I'm getting my ass whipped in, he was 69.
Yeah.
He's shooting J's, whipping my ass in basketball.
And my dad probably hasn't done anything physical since he was in his 40s. Like that's when he turned it off. He turned it off in his 40s and he never turned it back on. Like he hasn't done a physical fitness thing in his life since, probably his 30s or definitely his 40s. He used to play softball, adult type softball or whatever. But yeah, I mean, he worked, he ate shit, and he hasn't exercised or anything. I mean, he won't go walk around the neighborhood. Like it's sitting on the couch, sleeping, that's it. There's no physical activity whatsoever.
Yeah, man. And like, obviously, like, yes, it's easier when you're younger, but like if you're in your 30s and 40s, it's like, man, you can really still turn the clock back.
Yeah.
I started working with guys in their 50s, 50s and 60s. It's a different reclamation process. And then obviously like beyond that, it's like, let's stave off what's going to happen. But if you're in that 30 to 50 range, it's like, oh my God, dude, like the return on how you're going to feel and perform if you're not doing those kind of like just fundamental things, it's insane. Like the buyback that you get from the effort.
Yeah. I turned 47 in November. And I go to jujitsu, and I can't tell you how many times, I think we talked about this the other day.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I'm rolling with some dude and he's like in his 20s and he's out of breath and looking at me and he goes, how old are you? And I'm like, 45, 46. And he's like, fuck, I'm 20 something and you're killing me.
Yeah. But dude, like what an inspiration to those guys, man, to be like, I can, because that's with jujitsu. I kind of I've had that comprehension of like, when will because there will be a time period in your life when you're not going to get to do certain things, right? Like, when is the last time that you sprinted, right? Like, well, if you're 90, maybe not. When's the last time you had sex, right? Like, when's the last time you go down the list? And you know, I've rolled that around in my head of like, man, how long will I get to do jujitsu? And obviously, like, doing it safely will extend it. But like, yeah, you get on the mat with a guy who's like 50 and still can kick your ass. You're like, all right, here we go. And there is whatever you're into. It doesn't need to be jujitsu. It can be obviously endurance training. Um, it can be, doesn't even have to necessarily be a fitness piece, but you can extend your ability to interact with whatever it is that you're into. Like you could be into like building muscle cars, right? Like that could be your thing, or drag racing. It's like the physically healthy, fit version of you gets to interact with that longer. Period.
Well, look at that. So I grew up watching NASCAR. My grandparents loved NASCAR. You know, I went to NASCAR races my whole life. Justin grew up in Kentucky. He probably likes NASCAR too. You know, so, but you look at the 70s and the pit crew, and they all had beer bellies, and, you know, they look like, you know, they just got off the couch, you know, and they were fat. You look at them now and they're all elite athletes.
Yeah.
The pit crew are elite athletes. You watch the F1. I haven't seen it, but I've seen some of the clips from the F1 series on Netflix. And the drivers, they are elite athletes. I mean, we're talking LeBron James, we're talking Michael Jordan, we're talking, you know, you name the elite athlete. They are that level of athlete. And they're racing a car, and there's a reason for that. Their reflexes are quicker. They have more endurance. They can, you know, all of the things are better when they're in shape. And the days of having a beer and jumping in a car and driving fast, they realize that, yeah, you can do that. But if I'm in better shape, then I'm going to beat you, because I'm going to do everything better than you, because I'm in better shape, and my back isn't hurting, and I'm not hungover, and all the things are just better because I'm showing up with my A game and you're showing up with your C game.
Yep, dude. That's even on the intellect, like the brain body, like say there's a connection, like it's not mind and body, it's mind and body. These are linked. And I mean, like there's, from good workouts, you're going to get some proteins released that are good for your brain. Like if you're worried about brain health and you're not exercising, you're missing a massive piece of leverage.
Justin, go ahead. Justin's got a question.
Go ahead, Justin.
It's not really a question, but just being around you guys, of course, playing this softball, I've gotten a lot more health conscious, and just hearing and listening to you guys makes me more health conscious. So last night I went to go get a cupcake. I took one bite and then threw the rest away. So baby steps, right?
Sure.
So I'm learning from you guys, or just by listening, you know, make better choices and find better foods. And ultimately, yeah, I am getting older, and my quads are killing me from running. Never ran that fast before in probably 30 years. And all of a sudden, you know, maybe because my kids are out in the field and I'm wanting to impress them, and I'm running hard, and they're like, "Oh, Dad, yeah." And here I am back out in the outfield, stretching my legs in between pitches because I'm fucking hurt. It's killing me. So I do want to get better, stronger, and you know, I think listening to you guys, it's an inspiration, and it definitely helps, and hopefully other people will see the same thing too. So I appreciate what y'all are doing.
I love that, man. And I love, like, you know, when I talk to clients, like I have an exercise I have all clients go through, and it's called like the big why. And it's really like coming up with like, why is this actually important? Because like it is some work at first until you cross that threshold where you're getting just a natural return on the effort of feeling good. But until you get to that point, you're gonna be like, this is tough, right? Like Aaron, when he at 350 said, I got to do something about that. That's a tough slog he's got ahead of himself. And until he crosses a threshold to where now he just feels good eating this way, moving this way. So to get there, you do need to have this internal driver, man. And like, so kids to me, I think are like the best tool. And it's so funny because you can talk to one guy and he's going to say the reason he's not healthy and fit is because he's got kids. And another guy, he's healthy and fit because he's got kids. And I just think think of the experience and the relationship and the adventures that you get to have. I mean, I can tell you for myself as a kid, the thing that I enjoyed the most when I reflect back with my dad was playing catch. And he played catch with me. He worked his ass off. He ran his own business, a bike shop business. So 12 months of business done in 6, would come home after work, come out to the cul-de-sac and play catch with me. And it's like, and he could throw hard, and he was fit enough to do that. And so, man, you being able to like get out there and like not just watch your kids, but like play with them, like, dude, that's huge, man. Like that's what it's about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and go ahead, Neal.
The the one thing I'll add real quickly, because I think it's really interesting, is to your point, Luke, now we have standing desks because we work at home, and there's just a lot more sitting around, and there's scrolling on your phones, and then there's like this whole different world has evolved where now it's like the basics now have to be kind of like worked towards.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, dude, that's a great point.
It's like, because it's real easy to look at something and be like, hey, before you want to be quote unquote happy, drink water, get good sleep, eat healthy, exercise every day, have good social circles, have good sex. And it's like, literally, we now live in a world where those things need to be like approached. They're just not everyday things for everybody.
Yeah.
And I'm always reminded, like, whenever I talk about anything physical fitness, I'm reminded about like, there's this thing called the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it's like just proven over and over and over again. And for anyone who doesn't know what this is, it's kind of like a pyramid, but basically says like they use it in India a lot when they're like, how come everybody doesn't have air conditioning or the roads aren't good? And it's like, on the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs is your physiological needs. And like, you can't even care about air conditioning when you're worried about feeding yourself every day.
Yep.
But like in our world, we tend to think about our emotions, our relationships, our time, like productivity, our work, a career, and mission. And then, like, of course, like celebrating things and having some kind of like some kind of conscious like experience at life. And I always tell people, like, if you're stuck in your head, like, the way you got there was because you got out of your body, and the only way to get out of your head is to get into your body, and the only way to tell if something is bad in your body is if you're spending enough time in it.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like this weird relationship that we now have, because too many of us get stuck in our heads all the time. And if you're worried about money, worried about what people think of you, worried, you won't even figure out the fact that like your knees hurt when they run because you haven't run in fucking 3 months.
Right. Yeah.
Nah,
dude, I love it's funny that you mentioned like the stand-up desk and all that. And it's like, that is kind of where it's at for people in this environment, is like, you are going to have to get like tactical and strategic to push back against the fact that like the environment today is just incongruent with who we are as human animals. It's like, we weren't naturally meant to work 8 hours at a desk. Like, that is so incongruent with your body's expectation of reality that you are going to have to get strategic about it. And it's like, well, that's like that's the cost of the game right now. Like, I know Justin, obviously, like, he's into some film, and so like editing, it's like, well, you got to edit the film. So you're going to sit there and do it. Like, there's no not doing it. So you're going to have to get strategic to offset some of these things. Same thing, obviously, like on the nutrition side. It's like, well, it sure would have been a hell of a lot easier if donuts didn't exist. And like, I literally have a donut store 2 blocks from my house that when you walk by, it's just like smelling heaven. Like, it'd be easier if that just wasn't there, but it is. So you're going to have to get strategic to deal with the fact that like the environment is a little incongruent with being healthy and fit. And there's a reason we have such dire health and situation in the United States.
Well, and I know I want to wrap up because I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So Luke, thank you for being here. But just right on that thing, like when I first started, when I was 350 pounds, I had to get rid of everything that was a temptation. So there were no cookies in my house. There was no ice cream. There was no pie. There was no soda. There was none of that, because I knew if I was close to it, I would eat. It was like an alcoholic or an addict, right? I couldn't be around it. But now, like, my kids can have cake and ice cream and all the things, or fried chicken or whatever. And I'm not saying I never eat it. What I'm saying is I can say no, it doesn't. I'm not tempted in that same way, in the way that I was. I remember how it was to be that 350 nacho dad, and how I literally could not resist. I couldn't imagine, working or not eating the ice cream or exercising or skipping the meal. Like, I literally drank soda from the time I woke up until the time I went to bed. That was the only liquid I put in my body, other than alcohol, when I put alcohol in my body. Like, nothing I did made me feel good. And I didn't know it until I changed. And then now I know how I feel now compared to how I used to feel. And it's night and day difference. It's why I don't drink as much as I like. I'm not saying I never drink. Justin and I went and drank the other night, right? And that's fine, but I don't do it every weekend because I don't want to, because I feel like shit when I do, and I know how it feels. And for me, I don't want to feel that way because I want to feel this way, right? And I enjoy the way I feel now, and I feel like shit when I do this. And it's not just alcohol; it's sugar, it's all the things, right?
Yep, dude. And I think that's so important for people to hear. Like, this is what we kind of talked about earlier. Like, you won't know until you get there. And I would imagine, like, you can't even, you're out on the other side of that, where like the idea of like, hey, tomorrow, man, just like as a test, like, let's get up and only drink pop tomorrow. You'd be like,
No.
fucking not a chance. Right? Like that, like you've killed that old version of you. He's so far gone. And there is a like you can transcend to that point. If you're a guy who's like in the struggle right now, like there is that version of you. There's always going to be some things that might have some like physiological pulls on you that you would have a desire for. Well, there's ways to I call it the strategic treat. And it's really simple. It's like, you never have it in the house. You only buy it in single serving size, and you remove all guilt when you have it. And if you do that, like, you can execute on moderation. And just to get into a couple little tactical things here at the end here for people is, when you are looking to make those adjustments, like, this is how I kind of coach guys. And like, it's like the overarching like thread of it all is set guaranteed minimum standards and hard lines, and then slowly move them. Right. Like, anybody can do anything hard for 30 days. Who gives a shit? Right. Like, okay, you didn't have, like, I care less about what you did that was so hard for 30 days. Right. Like, should do something for a year. Right. And you do that by minimum standards, hard lines, and slowly adjusting it forward. And on the other side of that is the version of you who will look back at some of your past actions and your past habits around exercise and nutrition. And you'll be like, how the hell did I ever do that? I can't imagine doing it, because you would just feel fucking terrible.
What a great way to wrap up. I love this.
No shit. Wrap us up, Neal.
Luke, thanks so much for doing this. Really appreciate you hopping on again. And for the guys who joined, awesome. You know, we're going to continue our men's health month here over the next couple of weeks with a bunch of cool things going on. But Luke, great to have you in our circles. Good to see you as always. And we'll see everybody else next week, and see you in the platform.
Thanks, everybody.